Oh, a little bit of Old Birds performing I Want to Grow Up to Be a Politician, which seemed appropriate given our next guest. In the,
I didn't want to grow up to be a politician.
Oh, but we're going to talk about those folks who did or want to be, right, Fred Klonsky?
Yeah.
I referred to you as a blogger and radio host, but really a retired art teacher, I think, is where your real
and
warmth
union rep,
and persona.
and activist.
And union president, yeah. And,
progressive.
And
he was in SDS, too.
And union rebel in SDS, too, yeah.
Hardly know where to start with you, Fred, except we
Can
do
I say
have a
that
couple.
was a really interesting story. You promised an interesting show today, and so far, I'm sitting out listening, and that was.
I saw you listening attentively out there in our green room.
No, I kept thinking about Kevin. Is that his name?
Michael.
Michael, yeah. Michael, what great training to go into corporate media.
Yes.
Kind of but I think that's what we call the null curriculum. What they don't intend to teach, they end up teaching anyway. So he's getting good experience in what it's like to go out in the real world of corporate media.
So before we really get rolling with you, I want to make a couple of quick announcements. We want to remind people that early voting has started, and you ought to be getting out there, even if you can't quite decide who to vote for mayor. We're going to be talking about that in a moment. But there's early voting now, and certainly February 26th ought to be on your calendar if it isn't already. A couple of days before that is the Gentle Warriors Award, connected with the Pullman Foundation out in Pullman on the south side. It's on February 24th. You can find out more about this on Facebook. The Access to Care Salon on February 23rd, and of course I can't find my sheet on this. Rogers Park Art Alliance, along with the Third Estate Art, it is having an event on Saturday, February 23rd from 7 to 9:30 at the Factory Theater at 1623 West Howard. This is to raise money to help fill in on child care, health care, mental health services, and other community supports that are needed. And finally,
I got one too.
Wonderful voting resource has just produced a Spanish version. Chicago Vote, Shy Vote, is a very important resource if you are confused or concerned about who to vote for, alderman or mayor. Those are the main races up there, along with treasurer and city clerk. Chicago Vote is a great resource to find out where there might be a forum you can go to, how to sign up to volunteer, and now it's available in Spanish. Michael.
And I just want to throw in there that Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed settled with the NFL for Kaepernick's, they're saying $60 to $80 million. There's still a question whether he will be able to get a job in the NFL playing. He did say that he would play for this new football league that premiered on CBS the other night. He'd play for $20 million. So he at least is in the money. Hopefully he continues to be kind of a leader in questions about racial and political, justice.
And tonight at the Hideout, the final performance of the Young Strachey Arstalls. We really want to congratulate Jason McGinnis for all his wonderful work, and hope that someone will pick up the ball in this wonderful effort to help young musicians. They've entertained us at our annual benefit a couple of times now. That is tonight at the Hideout, the final performance of the Young Strachey All-Stars.
And Save the Hideout.
And Save the Hideout, which is an ongoing concern.
Yeah, we're going to try and get them on soon to talk about these Lincoln Yards, which is really a disaster. What is your take on that, Lincoln
It's a
Yards?
scam. They should shut the whole thing down. Stop.
So they're trying to ram it through before there's a new mayor and a new council. What are the chances that'll happen?
That's the first issue is to slow it down and not for the city not to be giving them TIF money to build this monstrosity.
And we got the Amazon example.
There was a story in Cranes yesterday. Did you see it, Thom? The Tribune now is put on the market their property that's at Halstead in Chicago, south of Chicago Avenue. They've already selling the parcel north of Chicago Avenue. And what we'll have, if that all happens, is that we'll have an unbroken stream of monster-sized, expensive real estate going basically from Chicago Avenue to Fullerton along the river, along Elston Avenue, for places that working people cannot afford, that are built.
Working people used to work in factories in those.
Where there actually used to be jobs
Long live
in this
Finkel
city.
Steel.
And so from that's a huge swath of land that is really it's taken off the tax rolls because it's TIF stuff, and also it's not it's not neighborhood development. It's development for the wealthy and the rich, which is the plan for this city. It was Daley's plan and Rahm's plan.
It was called the Chicago 21
It's
plan.
probably Bill Daley's plan,
and
too.
it's probably Bill Daley's plan too. Yeah.
To my mind, I don't care what the boys do with their monopoly board, but they don't get TIF dollars for it. If they want to put in luxury housing, they have to build their own streets.
That's not the intent.
I know.
I'm saying that's not the intent of TIF money. The TIF money was
Slum and blighted.
Was to try and develop a government-private partnership to invest in neighborhoods that need it. Elston Avenue between Chicago Avenue and Fullerton is not a blighted community. It's expensive land. They already tore out Cabrini Green and public. It's kind of a new kind of public housing, isn't it, Mike? It's like what
Public
used to be
housing
public
for the rich.
What used to be public housing for working people is now public housing for the most wealthy.
So let's turn. I knew we'd get to Lincoln Yards, and I don't want people to forget that Rescoville is also up on the docket here.
I love the term. Yeah.
Well, Project 78 is a silly way to call it. It's Rescoville, and we need to
Explain
remember
that for our listeners.
Well, there's this chunk of land to the south that was originally supposed to be River City, going way back, which got stalled, and that was a UDAG grant. That was federal partnership with private. But there's this parcel of former railroad yards running south of the Loop, south of Printers Row. Up to Roosevelt. And it's been empty for years, in part because it had been assembled and repackaged and reassembled and remarketed. And, of course, it was one of the parcels I thought maybe Amazon would be interested in. Well, now
They're going after that again.
now it's another Lincoln Yards type development, except it's even bigger,
That's right.
potentially, in terms of because you have all the other South Loop development that's been going on. I mean, I think what folks need to understand is this Chicago 21 plan has worked over
That's
the
right.
last 40 years.
That's right.
The city fathers primarily have managed to clear out the ring around the Loop and make it white again.
This is
make
well,
it
this
white
has
and
been,
rich.
This has been the strategy really since Harold, and that is that since Harold died, we've lost 300,000 African American citizens from the city. Not just from the city; they really left the region.
The region.
Because the jobs aren't those union jobs, industrial jobs that made up the base of Chicago. Those jobs are gone, and the people who worked in them are gone too. And those people were mainly black and brown people. And in exchange, we've had 300,000 people who make over $150,000 a year, white folks, and this is who these developments are designed for, and that's what the South Loop project is, and that's what Lincoln Yards is. They're trying to turn our city into a city exclusively for the rich and the wealthy and the white. And when that's not our story. That's not the city we live.
It's not what we're rooting for.
No, not only are we, it's not only not what we're for. It's not what we've been. That's not why people came to Chicago. It's not why the Great Migration took place. People came here for work, and they came here for decent paying jobs, and I don't want to prettify what Chicago was like in the old days, but it wasn't a city for the rich or exclusively for the rich. Certainly, the rich made their money off of it, but this is a working class town, and that's what we want to keep it.
So this working class town has a big mayoral open field election coming up, and I promised our listeners we talk a little bit about those of us who early voted.
If you can explain
why
this election,
we voted,
I'm not sure I'm going to be much help.
why we voted for who we voted for in an early election. The most recent poll seems to suggest there are 5 top candidates, except they're all grouped together.
Well,
so it's a
what
real
the recent
toss-up.
poll told me was that the leading candidate in the race is I have no idea. I don't know who I'm going to vote for, and it's striking to me that people come up and ask me who I'm going to vote for in my ward and in this. Mike asked me that the first question this morning.
I ask everybody that.
And but it's an interesting situation that people would ask someone like me who I'm going to vote for, because when Harold ran, right, no one had to ask me who I was going to vote for.
No, but it's different right now.
That's my point, is that it's different now, and it's on us that it's different now. In other words, I go back to the the 2016 presidential primary in Illinois, where Bernie Sanders came in. Really, the primary only lasted about 3 weeks.
Yep.
He was 20 points down against Hillary, and in 3 weeks, he split the vote, half and half. We had there was a strong progressive movement, and Chicago's always had a strong electoral movement. That's who elected Harold, right? But then we kind of dropped the ball. Then we had a governor's race.
We always do after we get someone good in office.
Well,
we lay back.
We had the governor's race, and I would go to gubernatorial forums, and all these white guys. It'd be 8 white guys up on there, all kind of jabbering, saying basically the same thing. And now we have a mayor's race where the differences are there's nobody who really no person who represents the street movement that we've seen in this city over the last couple of years, the Black Lives Matter and the struggle around the schools. There's nobody running for mayor that really that's
in the top tier
that we put up. We had Amisha Patel. From Grassroots Collaborative on our show, by the way.
That's Hitting Left with the Klonsky brothers on Lumpen Radio on Fridays at 11 a.m.
And podcast all the time.
Central Time.
Thank you for that. So Amisha was on the show last week. I know she's been on your on your show, and she runs this great organization and really a brilliant woman, and so we talked about this, and she said, and her explanation was, well, we were when Rahm dropped out, when he said he wasn't going to run again, we were caught off guard, and we all kind of laughed. This is what we've been asking for years, ever since he shut down 50 public schools, and ever since anyway, that's been our demand.
I think you're onto something, because if we complain about the uncertainty and all that, we need to hold up the mirror. Because we're supposed to know something about coalition politics and whatnot, we didn't do it this time.
That's my point.
So I did tell our listeners that we might disclose this morning what us early voters did, and you actually did on Facebook yesterday. You voted for Lori.
I said I was going to vote for Lori.
I will disclose that I was leaning Lori, and I voted strategically for Tony yesterday, and I've almost been regretting it ever since because of this. I think this is the way other people are torn about this.
That's right.
Having interviewed both of them inside of a week back in December, I was very impressed with Lori Lightfoot. I know there's some baggage, but anyone who's done something is going to have some baggage. And in interviewing Tony, she can run the city. I may not like everything that she might do to run the city, but with the union support she has and all that, I at least think there's someone who can run the city. Amara has great ideas, as we told her when we interviewed her 4 years ago here. Run for something like state rep or alderman before you run for mayor, because I don't see how she can run the city. I'm inspired by her worldview, and I'm going to put aside the personal stuff for the moment. I just don't think she's ready for prime time in terms of someone with a more progressive point of view. So I'm curious in how you arrived at Lori. And I don't know that Michael, who hasn't voted yet because he's still on the fence.
Before you talk about why you arrived at Lori, and you already mentioned why you arrived at Tony, here's the thing. No one's going to win the election outright, going to get 50%. So the two top vote getters are going to be in. So it's probably going to be Tony, and it could be one of
There's no probablys about this, Michael. That's the point. They're within 1 point of
all
each
right,
other.
what I'm saying
They're
is
inside the margin of error.
What I'm trying to say, Tom, is that I'm leaning Lori. I'm sometimes tempted to go for Tony because I think she has a better chance of getting into those two top spots because we don't want Daley, Mendoza, etc.
That was my calculus, exactly.
Yes. So I'm holding off. I'm not voting till Election Day to see where it's at with Tony and Lori, because that really, to me, is my choice still. You guys have already made your choice.
Yeah, I guess we split the difference.
Monday at noon. We went over to the Bucktown Library. Ann and I were the only people there, other than the people.
There is a lot of early voting, though, going on.
No, there's not. It's way down.
No,
it's way down.
It's way down, and
no lines, no waiting.
You guys work it out, and I'll come in when you. The fact is that there's a massive unhappiness with the choices which is why even the top people in this Sun Times poll it's like 14%. 14% of the vote went to Tony, and each then the top tier was 1 point away from each other. So there's no predicting, and I would say, Thom, that's the problem with what's become known now as strategic voting. People are guessing and trying to predict who the top two will be. But it's unpredictable. That's what the polls mainly show, is that we have no idea who the top two are going to be. And so to me, you try in a situation in which we don't really have a unified, progressive electoral movement that's put up a candidate. None of these candidates were put up by us. These were all chosen by somebody else. So this isn't the result of a progressive movement that's coalesced and put up a candidate like we did for Harold and
Chewy,
or for Chewy. That's right. And so in some wards, you have 2 or 3 people who are genuinely progressive that are running against either incumbents or against each other. And this is not the Chicago. I mean, all around the country, we're looking at elections in which people like AOC, that are really are driving the political questions that people are talking about all across the country. And Chicago, the place where we've always been in the vanguard of that kind of political movement. These are the choices we have. So I voted for Lori Lightfoot. I think she's was the best of the lot. I mean, I'm not a spokesman for the Lightfoot campaign, and I'm not here to argue that anyone should vote for her, other than I think that she's a progressive woman. I think voting for a African American gay woman with a progressive record, that's who I would vote for. I'm not like I say, I'm not here to campaign for Lori, but I do think one I wouldn't do is I couldn't bring myself to vote for the chairman of the Cook County Democratic Party. That's not my voting record. And aside from the fact that I think
Tony,
thanks, that Tony Preckwinkle has been disappointing on a number of questions in her role as president of the Cook County Board and before, having to do with for example, pension issues and things like that. But I wouldn't focus on that. I guess I'm thinking about looking forward and what the next election will look like. What's the progressive movement in this town going to do with the part of its responsibility that touches on electoral politics? It's not the only thing we do. We do lots of different things, but electoral politics are a part of it. And I think we have a responsibility to put Chicago back in the situation in which which was an example, a leader, especially in electoral politics, of coalescing around a clear candidate that represents their issues and not being caught off guard when Mayor Rahm decides that he'll leave and the millionaires hope that they can get a Bill Daley. I mean, what was the point of Ken Griffin's $2 million donation in the last 2 days for the? You can't even spend $2 million in the next 2 weeks. Although clearly, if Daley makes it into the runoff, he'll have all the money he ever needs to. He's not looking for money. So this was a message to me. It was a message by Griffin to his buddies in the 1% that Daley's their guy, and if they had any doubts about it, which I can't imagine they would, this is a message, but it's also a message to everybody else, which is he's their guy. He's not.
Now, is Daley an environmentalist? Because I know Al Gore came out for him. I'm just curious.
Other than his role as a Wall Street bankster and hedge fund manager,
and check that ad out from the Operators Union. Yeah. It lays out Daley's really bad side.
And illustrative that he and Preckwinkle it wasn't even 24 hours after Amazon said that they were going to pull out of New York that both Preckwinkle and Daley jumped on it and said, "Oh, come on to Chicago," even though it was clear, even though this was clear that this Amazon deal just sucks, and it is can I say sucks on
You certainly
on
can.
Loyola's radio station?
You have.
It sucks, and good for New York, and good for the organizers in New York that scared Bezos away. But how do you declare yourself a progressive candidate for mayor, and the ink isn't even dry, and you're writing a letter. You're asking Amazon to come back and reconsider, and they didn't even ask. Amazon didn't ask for offers, and they were making them. So these can't be progressive.
But Google is expanding here.
Great.
You already mentioned in your own ward that there are several progressives running against each other, and somehow we lucked out in the 49th ward where we're going up against an incumbent with just
That's the
one.
way. Yeah, you guys. I mean, I have to say, you guys in the 49th ward are really examples of building a political organization at the base.
We are very glad to hear you say that,
No,
because your word means something to us.
No, I think that's exactly right. And so when election time came around, and it was time for someone serious to challenge Joe Moore, you had a candidate, and nobody in the 49th ward is confused about who they're going to vote for if they consider themselves a progressive a Democrat. They know who they're going to vote for.
That's true.
But you can't say that.
Our major challenge, in fact, is going to be getting voters out in February.
That's right.
Because there is interest, but it's February. It's the incumbent's dream.
Well, this is nothing new in Chicago. I mean,
No.
this is when our elections.
when we have elections,
This
when
is when we have
poison.
and always have, and it's never kept us. It's never kept us from the biggest turnout in the history of mayor's elections was to elect Harold Washington. It was in cold weather, and the lines
That's good to remember.
and the lines went down the block. So if you put somebody up there, people, if you build it, people
They
will
will
come.
come.
That's
right
right.
on.
I can't believe how little time we have left to go over 10 more issues, but
Please come
Let's
back.
we'll do a speed round.
a big
Yeah.
story that's been in the news for a couple of years now is back in the news because the sentencing of the police officer convicted of murder
Jason Van Dyke.
is under review.
That's right.
And in another example,
Apparently, it was under review by some of the prisoners up in
that as well in Danbury,
Connecticut. Wherever it was.
which is considered
yeah.
a white country club sort of prison. But so that's interesting too. What do you think of this review? I mean, amongst other things, it occurred to me that elections do matter. We
That's
have a new
right.
attorney general,
That's right.
same party, but a new attorney general who took a very different look. And I think it's important for people to realize that the special prosecutor is a Republican prosecutor from DuPage who also is asking for a sentence review.
Well, one is, I think most decent, honest people who watched went on were as shocked as you and I were. I don't know. Shocked is the word. I guess. I guess I was really shocked that he was convicted at all. That doesn't happen. Which, by the way, shows. I get sidetracked, and my world often gets confused by spending too much time on Facebook. But there was some people attacking Lori because she was a federal prosecutor.
Oh, yeah.
And they were saying prosecutors are cops, and I just thought to myself, well, we worked hard to get Kim Foxx elected as state's attorney, and Kim Foxx is not a cop.
Jail population's down.
Certainly, the guys who have been released from prison based on false convictions because of the work that Kim has done don't consider Kim Foxx a cop. Larry Krasner, the DA in Philadelphia, who's worked hard on bail issues and on false convictions. He's not a cop. We have our friend Chesa Boudin running for district attorney in San.
He's been a guest on the show.
He's running for district attorney. He's as a prosecutor in San Francisco. He's certainly not a cop. So that kind of thinking, that kind of big brush approach to things, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't ring true. And so here we have. I'm not a great fan of Kwame Raoul. But the fact is that he's responding, I think, to a demand at the base, to the outrageousness of the sentence that was given to Van Dyke, and good for him that he's pursuing it.
Okay.
Last but not least, quickly, what about the Ricketts family and Cub fans?
I haven't been to a Cubs game in 5 years.
I thought you were a diehard. Oh, you're Brooklyn.
no,
Dodger.
no.
You're a Brooklyn.
And
Dodger.
and the Dodger,
Los
and
Angeles.
but can I tell you, I've never rooted for a team or not rooted for a team based on who owned it.
Yeah, I haven't.
Just
in football.
So
I also have not been inside Wrigley in 5 years, except for a James Taylor concert where I got discounted tickets. But they really priced me out some time ago, and with this new TV deal, particularly with Hulu,
I think that's right.
I think I'm going to be watching a lot of
People should
Sandlot.
know this is the as much as the younger Ricketts part of the family wants to distance themselves from the grumpy old man, right? They're the ones that signed the deal with Sinclair, and Sinclair is a Trump front, so they have to answer for that. But it won't keep me from watching a ball game, that's for sure.
Do you think we'll pull off enough victories for progressives to have control of the city council?
Control of the city council?
Yeah.
In this
30 seconds.
in this election? No. But there's good things happening at the ward level, and that's I always go back to what Karen Lewis told us years ago, which is that our job is to change the political landscape of this city, and I think doing it certainly at the ward level, we're doing some
Right
good
on.
stuff.
That's good.
Fred Klonsky, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we want to thank our
be
earlier
here.
guests for joining us, which Roseanne Magada and Michael McDevitt. Next week, we have Glenn Reedus, a editor, to do a final look at the election. We also have a spokesperson from State Matters, and Funkadaisy will be in the studio. Before we hear a little bit of Curtis Mayfield to take us out, I want to let people know that the interlude earlier was a promo video for the Joel Hall Dancers. And we want to thank producer Lynn Orman and engineer Jake Levy and Michelle Song for capturing video. Please like us on Facebook on Live from the Heartland Radio.
Join us on Hitting Left on Fridays.
Do good in the world, Michael. The world needs all the good.
All power to the people, and don't forget it.
Yeah, Black Lives Matter.